Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, for yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this, Paul. Episode 10
Right?
of the X button.
We
yeah,
here
I'm
to
one of your
stay, baby.
I'm one of your hosts, Alejandro, and with me it's the voluminous Paul Edwards. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm doing all right, Alejandro. Definitely feeling better from that sickness, and I am ready to talk about some stuff today.
Oh yeah, but how are you liking this zombie apocalypse simulator that we're all living in right now?
It is not as hyped as I expected. Murder is still illegal, I'm told, and all we're getting is the boring parts. So
Yeah,
I'm not a huge fan of it personally. I know there's some that are enjoying it. Actually, you know what? I don't have much to complain about because I'm getting to sit at home and watch TV, play video games, catch up on a
exactly.
backlogs. And I ordered Domino's last night, and they had half off of their whole menu. So I was like,
Oh,
"Hey, this is
nice.
life right here."
Yeah. So that's a good way to be experiencing social distancing.
Hmm.
Yeah, kind of same here. This whole working from home and not being able to go out has been quite nuts because what's hilarious is when last we recorded that same day, later that day, my country declared quarantine,
Right.
like because we recorded the day that E3 got canceled, and then literally a couple hours after we recorded, and all these things started breaking. That my country was
Hmm.
in quarantine, all these other countries started quarantining it, and more cancellations happened. Like even the NBA, like it's nuts how much has happened in a week. A
Really
week.
though, it
It's
is
literally been a
just
week of
crazy.
nuts. Yeah,
So they
yeah,
said,
and
oh, sorry.
yeah, and yeah, and just more and more stuff keeps getting canceled here. Like gyms have been closed. Like
Hmm.
restaurants can't open other than takeout. They're even trying to pass the law that when supermarkets open, that the first hour is only for the elder people, so that it's like less crowded and for them to have like a bit better chance of not getting infected by being
Right.
together with all these other people. It's just man, I never expected that 2020 would be the year of the apocalypse, but I guess we can always
Hmm.
be surprised, right? so, so Paul, in this self quarantined,
Hmm.
what have you been playing or
So,
watching or seeing, whatever? A
Alejandro,
little
you're
bit.
gonna give me a huge fat "I told you so," because the game that I went back to is none other than Horizon Zero Dawn.
yes.
I was
so,
looking for games, specifically single player games, to play because I really went on like a heavy multiplayer stint with like
uh-huh.
Dragon Ball Fighters in January. I played a lot of
Mhm.
Apex Legends last February and March. The Call of
The Modern
Duty
Warfare thing.
did that, a lot of that, and I was like, you know what? I just need like a good story. What do I have that I want to play? And everything that I really had, which usually is like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I've downloaded and uninstalled that game so many times just trying to get back into it. I was like, no, I just can't get into this feel. It just does not feel right.
Hmm.
I tried thinking about like maybe Outer Worlds, something else. I even went back to Assassin's Creed Unity back forever ago, and nothing
Hmm.
was sticking. And sure enough, I just on a whim decided, like, you know what? I'm gonna get back into this game. I'm gonna see what happens.
Do you know what? It's so fitting.
Mhm.
In when in the real world the apocalypse is real starting, there's
Yep,
nothing better than playing something that's post apocalyptic.
really though, where life is coming right back, and they're in like almost a medieval time of existence
Prehistoric
out
time, I
there.
would even say.
It's almost prehistoric, but like they still have like some good architectural stuff to build these cities. They got
Mhm.
the stonework, they got the mining of like beyond medieval. So it's like so unique in the way that their society is building in a very different way,
Mhm.
where like
Yeah.
weaponry is still kind of prehistoric almost, but then you've got so many other things that's left over from the previous time that they're able to use. So it's like creating this weird dissonance where you've got plastics and silicone and metals that are modern day, but alongside all this other stuff.
Now,
Uh,
real quick,
mhm.
now that you're playing Horizon almost 3 years later, now
Yes.
that you're not playing it when you were playing Zelda, which is what
Yes.
happened last time,
That is
how
what
are you
happened.
liking it? How are you
I
liking it now?
I am enjoying it so much more. I had to get that cleanse of like the open world aspect out of my head, out of my
Hmm.
soul. I enjoyed Zelda so much and like the style that it just soured everything about Horizon Zero Dawn for me. But now 3 years, I was like, I finally feel like I got it out of my system enough to appreciate it, and boy, it feels so much more refreshing. I can really appreciate the details in that game that I never realized. Like
It's
they
so well
said, the
crafted.
the
It's so polished and
puddles
well.
will
It's so polished and well
evaporate.
crafted. Yeah.
Yeah, it is just everything that they do with the details of the Aloy moving, the snow, the water, the way the animals, the machine animals behave, and I got into a much better flow with the combat and the way it's supposed to be, because I realized I'd misspec'd my character and just was
Hmm.
not using any of the stuff right. And now like I'm getting a much better switch between like the trip wires, the slingshot bombs, and the arrows. Being able to use two and three arrows at once just feels amazing as well.
Changes everything,
Oh,
right?
dude.
That's what I was telling you when we had that conversation on first
Yeah,
episode,
yeah,
or
yeah.
I think it was the second episode when the PC version was kind of rumored, and it actually has been confirmed now
Hmm.
that it's coming this summer. There is like, even though it's just bow and arrow combat, there's so much intricacies
Yeah.
with the bow and arrow combat, with like the different bows and arrows, and you like knocking three bows at a time, and then you like experimenting with like scanning the robot and seeing where exactly you have to shoot it, and then
Hmm.
even sometimes like shooting off like the laser guns from the robots and picking
Yeah.
them and then just like wrecking them on them. It's such a fun game, and I'm glad that this is like the case of you going back to a game years later that didn't click for you and for it finally clicking. That has
Hmm.
happened to me so many times, and I'm glad it happened to you with this game, because I was always dumbfounded that you were so like about it, and like Days Gone, which is a
Right.
much worse game in every way, shape,
Right.
or form.
It was just
So,
such a weird, I don't know, maybe like at the time, because I am not a fan of like the prehistoric aesthetic at all. Like I despise the Far Cry Primal. I can't
mhm,
get into was that new animation thing that the guy that made Samurai Jack made, like a caveman show that looks gorgeous,
mhm.
but I just don't like it because I don't like the whole caveman and prehistoric stuff. So I thought this was like kind of in that vein. But if I distance myself more from that, I can appreciate it a lot more.
Yeah, and the thing is that that what's cool about Horizon is that even though it has some sort of like caveman aesthetic, it really isn't. It's more like Native American slash more colonial ism
Hmm.
in a way that, and the further you go into that game, you see how like the architecture starts changing,
Hmm.
and then when you start doing more of like the side quests and you go even to the factories that built all the robots,
Hmm.
like it completely like it adds so much variety to that thing. And I still say the story of that thing is fantastic, especially like later on, how it all really clicks.
I'm
Like I
definitely getting to that feel at this point,
Yeah.
because like I just got to Meridian, maybe like 5 hours ago, gameplay wise,
Hmm.
and that opened up a whole lot of options for me just because I'm seeing a lot more of this real architecture going on. I just finished. I went up to this giant skyscraper. I don't remember what it was,
Hmm.
but it was up in like the northern area where I figured out like a huge mystery of how the machines came about and how all of this happened. I
Yes.
understand why it's
And you
called
see the
rant
holograms of the
compatibility.
mom, or
Yeah,
the
yeah,
quote
yeah.
unquote mom, and all that. Yeah.
So that was all interesting. I don't have anything past that. I finished that and came down the building and turned it off for the night.
Hmm.
So no more spoilers beyond that point. But
It's been
um,
3 years. Everyone that if anyone would have cared to buy that game, they would have bought it now. It's 9.99 on
yeah,
PSN.
really.
So like they really, which is why it makes sense that they're like selling it on PC, because they can open it out to a new market at full price and
Hmm.
people will pay that. So that's like really smart. But yeah, that's so cool. Everything else that you've been playing or watching?
Nothing else that I've been playing. I watched The Greatest Showman last night.
Oh
Um,
man,
and I mean, I'd seen it several times, like way forever ago when that came out, which I think that was early 2018. But still, that movie was just
hits
fantastic.
hits in the feels, right?
It really does.
The
It
song
strikes you.
"Home Away." What's the song near the end when they're like at the bar and he goes running back home,
Oh, Coming Home, I think. Oh
coming
shoot,
home
I'm
again or
forgetting it.
something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I remember watching because that was the last movie I watched since 2017, and
Oh,
that song gave me such like huge emotional reaction. I don't know why. There was just something about it, about that
From Now
song.
On is the name of
From now
it.
on,
That's what it
yes.
was.
Uh,
Yes, that actually that was the reason I went to go see the movie initially. I saw a random like behind the scenes video
oh yeah, when
on
everyone started
Facebook.
breaking on song.
Yeah, that's the one everybody went crazy about. I was like, okay, I got to see this movie.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun. But
So
that's
try to
about
keep
all I've been up
cheerful
to.
in these dark times, right?
Yes, trying to enjoy myself. I'm not one of those people that's going to be watching all the Contagion and Plague movies out there to get into the spirit of things. I'm trying to like
Gotta love all these
distance.
streaming services like propping all those movies up whenever I log in.
Really
Recommended. Yeah, like yeah, that's they're really taking advantage
though,
of
don't need all that.
yeah of kind of like the era that we are in. So that's it. That's all
That's
for you.
about it
Okay.
for me. What about you?
All right. So I've been chipping away at Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which I kind of mentioned last
Yeah,
week
how's
that I
that
started
been?
playing. So before when we recorded, I had just played like 30 minutes of it, and I was like, "Yes, it's more Ori." After we start recording, I started playing a little bit more. Man, I had a little bit of a push and pull with that game because at first I think I was not liking it, even though and that shocked me
Yeah.
because I freaking loved the first one so much. But I think because I started like really went into my own meditation and started to be introspective of why things were just not clicking at the time after we recorded that time and started playing more was
Mhm.
that what I loved about the original Ori is that it felt mysterious, it felt unique, it felt like mystical in a
Mhm.
way. It's like kind of like when you're playing something, it doesn't feel familiar. It feels so. It plays up that mystery. It's even kind of like Shadow of the Colossus in a
Yeah.
way. Which for people that have PS Plus, you can play it for free. By the way, here's your PSA. Uh, what was beautiful about kind of like when you go into that world and it's so mysterious and so eerie
Mhm.
and beautiful. That's how Ori felt to me, and like and being such a eerie Metroidvania style platforming adventure with a really gut punch of an emotional story without much saying much. That's
Mhm.
what made me to really love that and like really think a lot about that game. And also the soundtrack is probably my favorite soundtrack of any game this generation. It's like it's incredible. Like it really tugs at the heartstrings. Um, because the original game tugs at your heartstrings from the very beginning when this one doesn't. To me,
Mhm.
something felt missing, and on top of that, this game does what I have been hating so much of so many games recently: of let's add more because we can add more depth because we're a sequel and we have to add more.
Right.
So now let's add boss fights, let's add NPCs, let's add side quests, and now you can have all these different weapons and all that. And I'm
Mhm.
like, that's not what I liked about Ori at first. It just felt like they have made it a better video game in every way, shape, or form. Like it's a more quote unquote fun video game.
Mhm.
But to me, that just made it personally less special. And that really bummed me out. And I kind of like put it off for like a couple days and just started watching Netflix because that's when the apocalypse started here. And I just kind of wanted to watch some stuff. So I actually got to, but I actually went back to start playing it again after putting it down and taking that preconception out and just kind of like taking it and now getting more of the upgrades. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm seeing what they're doing here, and it's a really, really great game. Like
Oh, that's good.
my misconception aside, like objectively looking at it, what Moon Studios has done, which is basically an indie studio that has been incubated by Microsoft,
Right.
and the sheer beauty of it. It's like it's. I sent you in our group chat 4 still images of the game that were not concept
Right.
art. Those were screenshots from the game. That's how that thing looks,
It
and I still
blew me
stand at
away.
the. Yeah, I still stand at that every screenshot that you can take from that game, everything is painterly to the point of being like wallpaper worthy,
Mhm.
and I'm seeing even more beautiful stuff the further I'm going to the game. The game's a little hitchy though. I'm surprised that it actually launch with a lot of technical hiccups. It like freezes a lot, like when
Mhm.
you're moving from place to place and all that. I'm not that kind of like technical guy that gets super annoyed if like frame rate stops, like because I know there's some people that like notice if a game is like 60 frames a second and then it drops to 59. They're like, and I'm like, I'm not that kind. I'm not that big an asshole to get too hung up on like, oh, this game, the frame rate is like point 0.1 frame off.
All
Like
right.
some people, because there's some people are nuts like that.
Yeah.
Especially people on the PC side that like playing at their 144 frames a second. If it drops to 120, to them it's juddery. I'm like, to me, it just looks smooth. So
Mhm.
I'm not that big of a picky when it comes to like real technical issues, unless it's like really, really chugging, which happened to me with Days Gone at times when you're trying to fight
Yeah.
with all the hordes and it starts like chugging. That's the only time where I'm like, okay, I'm starting to notice things are not quite right here. Ori has some of that, but they've been patching it a lot. Every time it feels like I turn my Xbox on, it always feels like there's like a patch in the queue. I'm like, okay, cool. And it's like always smoothing it up. So I'm
That's
glad
good.
it's happening. So, and the fact that it's free on Game Pass, it's still like just one more feather to echo how awesome it is to play a new game right at launch with that kind of service. It's so cool, and I'm liking that game more and more. It's just like I really had like a weird reaction, but I think that's what happens when you put previous games in such a high pedestal
Mhm.
when they feel like they're beyond that. I know that sounds overly pretentious, but I really and we had behind the scenes conversations about Shadow of the Colossus and the value of that kind of game.
Yeah.
How like what I appreciated how singular it is in its pursuit of being a mysterious thing that's just a boss rush mode. But like everything surrounding that is what made that thing special.
Mhm.
And Ori and the Blind Forest, I kind of put it in the kind of that same pedestal that to me it felt more than just a game. This
Right.
one is more of a game, and I feel a lot of people that like to see things in an objective way, it's gonna tick a lot of boxes, and I can't recommend it highly enough, like more than highly enough than that, because they really did not a good job of like deepening it enough. Even though personally I didn't think it needed that.
Mm.
So, but yeah, that's kind of what I've been playing. I've been toying around a little bit more with the Destiny 2 season. That it's just literally feels like a job at this point. Like. Uh, I don't know. It's just there's just something about like that new this new Destiny expansion that's not doing it for me, or more
Really?
like season. And I don't know if it's because where I'm at in life that I don't want to be doing like busy work or something.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of grinding to advance some stuff and more grinding and stuff. And I'm gonna give it a few more weeks to see how it expands because they launched like a new quest to get like a cool new weapon that I haven't even started yet because I've just
Mm.
been playing more Ori.
True.
Uh, but we'll see. Yeah, so far it's the least I've been engaged with Destiny since post the launch of vanilla launch of Destiny 2. So hopefully it picks up. But hey, maybe some games are not meant to be played forever.
That
So
is very true, and that is the question that I think is not something that occurs to many of the larger developers. Like maybe
mhm.
a game shouldn't be played forever.
And I feel that's the fallacy of the games as a service thing that has become kind of like the thing almost every developer has been pursuing for this entire halfway through this generation, that literally every game started to have like a games as a service hook.
Hmm.
And it's a reason why so many developers stopped releasing so many games because they wanted the few games to kind of stick longer. And I feel for some that works.
Hmm.
But if you start crowding the market so much with so many games that require so much time, that market is just gonna collapse. And like for example with all these looter shooters that require all
Yeah.
that kind of investment, like I picked mine and that was Destiny. That's the one I'm always gonna stick with, and the other ones are done once I finish their campaign, even though they're designed to be played beyond their campaign. I
Hmm.
just don't have the time or desire. So yeah, and I feel there is something to be said about what do you call it about taking a break from those kinds of games, and I feel that's healthy. So I feel yeah, I feel Destiny 2 is not gonna be too highly played right now. I feel that's perfect because we have bangers coming out in the next couple months.
That we do,
So
and I'm
yeah,
glad at least these are not getting delayed anymore. At least.
at the very least the ones from March or April, yes.
Hmm.
Further from that, with all this COVID-19 worries, I'm getting worried. Like I know recently we got Ghost of Tsushima release date on the 26th. I know Last of Us has the May 29th release.
Hmm.
However, like I feel they're not safe. They're 100% not safe with all this like working from home and all the work disruptions that are happening. I don't think that's gonna that unless they go all digital for their launch and then launch the physical versions afterwards. Maybe
That
they
would be
experiment with that
interesting, but I
because
don't
I mean,
know if that they'll even be able to finish the full game as it is, because you got to have that transition time where people are getting back into the flow of their work from a different area.
mhm,
And I definitely think that's going to like very much impact the speed at which they can work, because once you get into a rut and like once you get into a routine, I'm sure like you start working way faster once you get that. Even if it's a change that might necessarily be for the better, if it's a change, it's still going to take time to fix yourself back into that
mhm.
situation, that routine, and I think that's definitely going to affect releases.
Yeah, and everything is getting destroyed in 2020 anyway. So let's just take the wins as they come. And as for what I've been watching, I've been rewatching Arrow. I
Oh my gosh, Alejandro, you have a
yeah,
problem, my dude.
no, because and the thing is, I haven't rewatched it for a while because I was just watching it for and then kind of like just watching new episodes as they came along.
Yeah.
I'm To me, it's like I call it the anti Game of Thrones because ironically, both these shows ran for 8 seasons. Also,
Oh yeah.
like I rewatched the entirety of Game of Thrones before that 8 season launch, and then that 8 season left me so crestfallen and so bitter towards the show that I don't even
Mhm.
want to hear about it or even want to see a footage or screen about it because it
You
just
don't
makes me
hear anything
angry.
about it anymore too, which
Exactly,
is crazy.
and then sometimes when I see like an image of like Daenerys or even Jon Snow, sometimes
Mhm.
I just kind of get physically angry because I'm like I championed that show for so long
Yep.
and stood at by it being one of the best shows of all time, and that final season completely threw that out the window and made me feel like I wasted my time. Then Arrow had so many ups and downs, but ended its final season in such a strong way that I've been like thinking about it a lot. That was like, kind of like it leaves you with kind of like that fuzzy feeling of like, man, that was satisfying
Yeah, I know what
and
you're
and it
feeling actually.
and it changed my opinion of kind of like it made me want to rewatch everything kind of with the context of how it all ended and seeing
Oh,
how they were able to recontextualize a show that started as a Dark Knight ripoff because it was grounded and all of that, and then and then suddenly it became like this centerpiece that launched all this super powered shows in the Flash and all that with actual comic booky stuff. And it's
right.
crazy that and again my weekly quota and then it ended all with that crisis event that I would have
Mhm.
never expected, but they made it all fit, and that's
Yeah.
why it's been so cool and rewarding of rewatching everything, even the seasons like the third or fourth seasons that I always consider the low points of that show.
Mhm.
Rewatching them, they're not as bad.
Really?
Yeah, because a lot of the themes from those seasons got recontextualized with that final season, and I'm like, huh. I know this is sleight of hand. I know that was not how they planned this back in 2015, 2016 when those seasons aired. But it's really cool when you stick the landing. It makes everything. It makes you ponder to everything, and that's been the cool thing rewatching, especially because whenever I haven't been, I want to watch something that's comfort food for me,
Mhm.
and to me that's kind of comfort food.
Hmm.
So yeah, I've been rewatching that, and yeah, more rewarding. Like it's been even more rewarding than I thought it would be. But let's see how I feel once I reach season 8 again. So,
Yeah.
which everything's on Netflix right now for everyone that needs something to watch. That entire series is there. 170 episodes. I don't know. I wonder if we're gonna be 170 days in quarantine right now, but hey, maybe you can do one episode a
Shoot.
day if you so desire.
I really hope it gets finished, because once again, I am getting married at the end of this year, and I need that. I need that to not be a thing.
Paul, have you considered delaying?
No, not in the slightest. We have so many things already put in there that there's no way we can just delay it.
I
Not to
mean,
mention, just for my own preferences, I'm not about to wait another day to marry this person. Um, just
I mean,
from like a standpoint of somebody that loves the person that he's about to get married to.
makes sense, yeah. But hey, keep your options open. You don't know if like then a meteorite is gonna drop on Earth. I mean, I think there was that in the news that there was a meteorite on course to hit Earth. So I'm like,
I'm just gonna
yeah,
stop you right there, Alejandro.
just end.
We don't need to talk anymore about this negative nonsense.
Well, too bad, Paul, because more negative stuff is happening because we had a PlayStation 5 quote unquote reveal today. So
Yeah.
press X for some news.
Mm,
Dun, 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 dun. So,
wow.
Paul, over the last few weeks, what have I been saying about like Sony's continuous silence and Microsoft just literally speaking out of their everything, left and right, uh,
Oh,
and
you've been
doing
saying
it?
that Sony has been scrambling and that they probably don't have anything really that great. And if they do have something, it's not going to be able to come back against what Xbox and Microsoft are doing.
Yeah, and how coincidental that then Microsoft this week of all weeks, a day before all their quote unquote GDC talks were supposed to have that they're gonna have with like the developers and all that, they released another blog post slash kind of like small announcement, kind of like detailing the specs, like
Hmm.
showing kind of like the innards, and actually showing 1 minute videos of the
Yep.
important stuffs. Like, hey, here's how quicker the console loads from an Xbox One X. Here
Hmm.
it is. Here's a minute and 30 seconds of State of Decay 2. The same game running on both hardware and seeing how quickly the other one the new console loads compared to the other one. And then also here's a 1 minute and 30-second video of our the multitasking thing of like loading being able to resume different games,
Hmm.
and you see it in video, and it was 1 minute and 30, and then mentioned like the 12 teraflops, and again just in clean text, small text for a quick scroll. Here it is. Now here's our talks for our developers that you may or may not want to tune into. A day after,
Yeah.
Sony freaking finally said, "Hey, this was Tuesday. On Wednesday, we're gonna finally talk specs about the PS5. Finally, after like silence since they revealed the logo back in January,
Hmm.
they're finally gonna be. Yeah, we're gonna talk about the everything that's in this box. But how are they gonna do it, Paul?
Through a 52-minute PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, framed like Mystery Science Theater 3000 without the laughs. Jesus Christ. So okay, so yeah, 52 minutes of Mark Cerny, which is like the system architecture guy that has worked in a lot of the PlayStation consoles, but became a prominent figure during PlayStation 4. Because on that February 2013 reveal event, that was actually 2.5 hours.
Jeez, really?
Yeah, it was that. It was that long. Actually, no, it was 2 hours. Sorry, it was a 2 hour event where like 25 to 30, the first 25 to 30 minutes was this same guy, Mark Cerny. Who
Hmm.
actually, what's funny is that if you should go back watch videos of him back on that February 2013 video, that
Yeah.
he looked like he hadn't slept in years.
Oh
Like
gosh.
you should look. He had like a very manic look
Man,
in that
I'm gonna
in
try
that
looking it up
PS4
while
video.
you're
Yeah,
talking.
yeah, it's hilarious. So he revealed like kind of similar to what he did right now, like explaining the where the PlayStation architecture came from with PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, and how they were pivoting to the different design that they had on the 4, and like what CPU it had, how much RAM it had, and blah blah blah, and different things. And then they started showing games. He showed Knack. That was
Right.
Knack. Literally was the
Yeah.
first PS4 game ever revealed. Uh, but they were at least they were like, okay, here are the specs. Here's how some games are gonna look. And this time, they do a 52-minute presentation with that. To be fair, I have to preface this. This we're recording the week that would have been GDC, the Games
Hmm.
Developers Conference. That thing got canceled. We talked about it 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks. I don't even know. It's everything feels like it's been a year now, and we're only in March. Uh, they had mentioned that they had something planned for developers. Remember how I told you that they needed to brief like what was the final
Yep.
specs and all of that? This was it.
I
This
realized that like
yeah.
excuse me, like it was unadulterated. It was not at all made for the consumer, but they just
Mhm.
released it for everyone as an
Yeah.
announcement.
And I tell you, what a blunder. What a freaking blunder from the marketing team. Hype
Yeah.
like after almost 3 months, especially because remember, this has been going since December when Microsoft literally dropped the box on us in that trailer at the Game Awards.
Hmm.
And then this is after like a fandom that has been starving to death, like literally starving to death for any information for like the next console. For them to for the social media for literally all the social media
Mhm.
to hype this event up for the reveal, especially when you can compare it to
Like its previous announcement or
yeah,
Xbox's.
exactly. No, but because the thing is that whenever they had done spec reveals, they have also had some games to show at times. Like
Exactly.
it worked beautifully on the PS4 reveal. It worked terribly on PS4 Pro because the things that they were mentioned, they were trying to tout, like the 4K or like the checkerboarding and all that, that didn't work well on the stream. So people were like, "I don't see the difference. What's the point of this?" So that
Right.
that kind of like blew up in their faces. The fact that they just did it like this, without like anything to really show for it, and it was just like charts after charts after charts of like what their new SSD was gonna do, like which is like that, which to be fair, like what when you actually look at it and start, I was been starting to like scrolling through like what some developers have been saying,
Mhm.
what the PS5 is doing with solid state drives, it's actually very impressive because they have custom built it, like they have an SSD that they have also custom built into something that they built in house to make it be like something so quick to load
Mhm.
that could literally change the way developers think about developing games. Imagine like especially just compared to right now with PS4, whenever you have to download an update, you
Mhm.
download the update and then it says copy, and then the
And it
thing
takes
takes
forever.
forever to copy. And the SSD is supposed to like eliminate that, and how like people think about streaming assets within their games and all that, like within a big map. Those are really technical stuff that sound really cool on paper, but you know what would have been cooler?
Mm.
Seeing it in action.
Yes.
Seeing it in
And
action, see like a game, like see how that like benefits the consumer. And the closest they got to doing something in action was when they were talking about the audio, which I don't know if you saw. That's when like all this weird charts started happening. There's something that looked like a weird portal or something.
oh yeah, there's a
Uh,
lot going on there.
yeah. So that's the thing. Like, it felt like I was at a college. I was like at a
Yeah.
college lecture, and the thing is that for developers, this is the kind of stuff that makes GDC exciting
Mm.
because this is when people can get really nerdy about this stuff. But that's why that is for GDC, and that's why you set the expectation right. But when you kind of like hype it up a little bit, like they did, that's a spectacular misfire. Especially because the thing that's most excited about the PS5 is not the specs, which when you look at it in the chart based on what the specs of the Xbox Series X is,
Mhm.
on paper, the PS5 is a weaker console than the Xbox Series X. And now Xbox and everyone that wants to be in the Xbox side, now they have their ammo.
Yep.
Even though the actual narrative it's more complicated than that, because developers have actually said that they have been most excited about the PS5 as a console
Mhm.
because of this stuff, because that's going to make their life much easier, this whole loading stuff, because so much development requires them doing a lot of magic behind the scenes to try to get everything streamed at times. I don't know if you ever played a game when you like move the camera so quick and you see like a white thing that kind of suddenly like loads up into a detail asset or all of that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you notice that, like I would actually, like, if you still have the game, pop The Last of Us
Mhm.
and try it. You're gonna notice some streaming hiccups there. If you
Mhm.
try to go through a place too fast, that's the kind of thing an SSD can really fix.
Right.
So, but right now, like in the numbers game, now I feel people are that's not what people are gonna talk about the PS5 because they didn't see anything.
Yep.
It was just numbers. A lot of mumbo jumbo for 52 minutes.
Yep.
And what did I tell you? I was like, when Sony tends to go second like that, they tend to face plant or waiting too much. And I feel the developers kind of like are in the right place because the PS3's huge hubris was making a console that was way too difficult to develop for and thinking that developers were going to adapt because it was PlayStation. That didn't work.
Mhm.
At the very least, the developer, from a development side, they're still trying to make developer development as easy as possible. So at the very least, that works. But how are we gonna have something tangible without actually seeing it? Yes, I said games are coming on later. I'm like, yeah, but you could have demoed something now. Like there
Mhm.
was a leaked video where when Sony was talking to investors back in 2019 that what you call it,
Spider Man.
they showed Spider-Man, how quicker it was, like traveling from city from place to place because of the SSD. Why not show that there in
I
actually high
thought that
quality?
was revealed.
It was leaked. It was leaked.
Oh, it
That
wasn't
was
like
a
an
leak.
official thing.
Yeah, it wasn't an official thing because it was officially said in the Wired article that they tested Spider-Man, because
Mm,
that felt like a really good example of what the SSD was gonna do.
yep.
But but yeah, not having all these numbers and not even showing something like really tangible, that really hurts them, especially since Xbox did that with Xbox One games. But at the very least, you can at least see something,
Hmm.
see it kind of play out. And I tell you, like seeing the quicker load times of the Xbox Series X and seeing how it changes from game to game to game to game, and seeing it work. It's not 1,000% instantaneous, but it
Hmm.
works. It's snappy. Because I saw them change from Ori to State of Decay to Gears of War 5 or other games, like all like boom, 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 boom. I'm like, huh, that's actually really cool. That's what they needed.
Yep.
And Microsoft did that just with an article they dropped on Monday instead of having us waste 52 minutes.
Hmm.
And now the big question is, when are they going to show the games even? Because
Yep.
there's still PS4 games. They
And
still
there's
have
no
PS4.
announcement that like, hey, don't forget, we're also doing this on this day, like Nintendo, for instance.
Exactly, where they like prepare you. It's like, here's what now. If you've been waiting for this, tune in this day. So, and they have confirmed that they said that the PS5 is not getting delayed from coronavirus yet. We'll see about
Oh, that,
that.
yeah, I was gonna say that is good, but that doesn't really mean much.
I mean, E3 said that they were not going to cancel one week, and the week later they canceled. So, in
Yeah,
this times you can't say that. But I tell you, Paul, like Microsoft's winning this right now. They're like, unfortunately,
in
like as
in a public relations
in a public
standpoint,
relations
I
standpoint, they're
agree.
winning. Yeah,
Yes.
and I think the only way that Sony can get away with this is during the price reveals. They once again undercut Microsoft,
Hmm.
and
Or
the
even
games
just the
look.
same.
Huh? Even this
I'd
what?
I'd say if they said it ended up being the same price, but then explained like all the mumbo jumbo in a simpler way, because like what the reasoning that this is causing such a hubbub is because they didn't explain what any of the stuff they were talking about meant, because of course it was technically meant for the devs, and I get that, but they didn't
Mhm.
market it like that, which is what we agree on. The
Exactly.
problem exists that if they don't tell the consumer what all of that meant and how this solid state drive is such a big deal, how the fact that the numbers don't add up to better, like
Hmm.
they're working more with less. Basically, they're trying to like
Exactly.
maximum efficiency versus the high specs of the Xbox stuff. Like there's pros and cons with both of those. Like
Exactly.
what they say, they said for most PCs in general, um, the temperature of the computer controls what its power is, but like the console and specifically with the PS5, it's not going to be held to that, so it's
Hmm.
always going to have that performance whether or not it's running hot or not, and that's
Exactly,
something
because
that
of
like
the new
nobody
cooling.
realized
Yeah.
unless it was explained to them.
Exactly, but the thing is that you can't expect people with a lot of attention deficit disorders at a time where everything is so heightened with this whole virus to
I
sit
wouldn't
at a
even say
PowerPoint.
like an
And not only
ADHD thing. It's just a fact that it was a very confusing and used words and techno babble that nobody's used
exactly,
to.
and that's why I commend Microsoft to put it as dummies as possible in the way how they, because that's the thing. You read the thing that I linked, right? The Xbox thing
Oh
that
yeah,
is just scrolling. It's like efficient, quick, boom,
oh
you're out. It's
yeah. And
like
I'm
it's
appreciating
boiled
that a
down
lot more after the
in
fact.
hindsight. In hindsight, yeah, because you were
Yes.
expecting games and all of that, right?
Uh huh.
Yeah, and that would have been the dream. Just like the first 15, 20 minutes specs, and then 30 minutes showing how that played in practice.
Pretty much exactly what I thought. Or that's how they marketed it. Basically, it was like this is
Hmm.
the reveal, and like everybody's like, we might get like a price today. Like where this is going to
Yeah,
be going on
that would have been
this.
stupid. Yeah, that people that were saying that's like, you don't reveal a price like that in March. That doesn't happen. Yeah,
Right. I mean, that
like
makes
yeah,
sense, but
yeah,
they
people got away with the hype, but
it was definitely a confusing way they worded and marketed
yeah,
that. So,
but just as I've been saying that Microsoft has been hungry and they
hmm.
have like they learned all of their mistakes. Everything that there is showing there, like everything how they've been slowly revealing this thing. Everything has been going right for them. The only way this blunders for them is if the price is not right and if the games don't look impressive, because that's Microsoft right now. The biggest Achilles heel that they have is that they have to prove, they need the proof in the pudding that uh, all the investments that they've made on games is going to pay off soon.
Mm,
But because at the very least, the Trojan horse, yeah, the two Trojan references here. The Trojan horse for Sony right now is the fact that they have earned such goodwill with their exclusives.
mm.
So
And
they
that's exactly why I would like continue to work with them because they still offer so many more exclusives than Xbox would.
exactly, and not just any more exclusives that are great,
Also true.
more exclusives that are like they're big events. Even when they have the rare misstep here and there,
Mm,
they bat more than they strike out. So at least in the PS4 generation, it's been like that because they struck out more during PS3 because they try to do so many to try to differentiate their console. They've been a little bit they scaled back, but it always feels like when a Sony in game releases, it's a big deal.
mm,
And at the very least, is knowing that they can have sequels for some of the big games from the PS4, that automatically makes it appealing. The problem now becomes how to make everything around that appealing. Like something that to me it's unacceptable is the whole backwards compatibility thing.
oh yeah, tell me about that, Alejandro, because that
Jesus
was
Christ.
something I picked up right after the fact when you pointed it out to me.
Yeah, so originally when they said back in the Wire article was that the PS5 was also going to be basically PS4, so PS4 games were going to work. After this presentation, Mark Cerny mentioned about how they tested the 100 most popular games on PS4 and how those were going to be available on launch day. So, okay, do you know what Microsoft gonna have when they launch?
The
The
entire library.
entire library of Xbox One since the console launched in November 22nd, 2013. And not just that, the entire library of the X360 games that they have enabled for backwards compatibility through a Microsoft Store and the original Xbox One games. And not only that, those backwards compatible games are going to be enhanced because the Xbox Series X apparently has a smart hardware in it that is going to enhance those games automatically without developers putting a single effort. That's thousands of games available. And then the PlayStation apparently is just focusing. What are the 100 most popular games on PS4? You know what this is? What this says, Paul? I'm not getting rid of my PS4.
Hmm.
I was thinking of doing that to be able to afford a new one,
Same.
but now I won't
Now,
because
I'm curious because you said like they tested it. Did they like
yeah,
officially say that was just like, oh, these are the ones that we've tried and they work, or
yeah,
are
and it
they
will be
just
yeah. These are the ones that we tried and worked and will be available at launch. And then they released a blog post to kind of like do like a summary of this event. And
yeah?
they say the PS4 has around 4,000 games, and we're gonna keep testing them and make them available through time. And I'm like,
I
that's
see.
completely unacceptable. All those games should have been available from the beginning. You said this was a PS4.
Well, now what I'm hearing from that is think about it this way. It's unquestionable that Sony and PlayStation have so many more games than the Xbox out right now that are like
Mhm,
not just first party but also third party. A lot of different people, a lot of stuff localized from Japan specifically. So
mhm,
what I'm hearing when you say that is like, yes, I get it. It is definitely a huge step back, but what I think is that they're taking the step forward that Xbox made last generation where they're starting to move that stuff in the general. There must have been something
mhm.
going on with the PlayStation 4 that prevented them
Yeah,
from
it
being
was a
able to do
PS3.
this.
It was a PS3.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm,
So I'm thinking like they must be now like what now that they're working from scratch, they're able to put that kind of stuff into the hardware that will allow them to actually move forward with these things. And now they're going to try playing catch up basically, and they're going to try to put all of this as much as they can. I mean, think about it. With Xbox, we were like, yeah, okay, that's cool that you got a couple of things for the 360 on the Xbox One, but that's
They
ridiculous.
started actually with 100 games also.
Right,
On
which I
PlayStation.
mean, it's a little less, but you said as you said, they've got almost the 100 that they've tested and are going to guarantee. So as I hear that is they are continuing to test things, and they're just going to keep putting stuff on as it's getting tested, so that
Mhm.
it's going to eventually build up to a massive library. Is where you look back now on the Xbox One, you could play so many games because they've been
Mhm.
testing it throughout this 5 year period, five, six, seven
Yes,
years.
2015. No, 2015 was when backwards compatibility started. So it's
That's
been
what it
five
was.
years.
Okay, so 5
Mhm.
years, is the time it's taken to do all that. Well, think about it, like, of course, they're gonna be playing catch up, they're behind on this, but I can see the effort that they're making on this, and I
Yes.
believe that given a time, if you look forward 5 years after this stuff is set up, I don't believe PlayStation is gonna get completely blown out of the water. They will on release, I believe, based on
Mhm.
the complete mismanagement of the information, based on like the lack of information. Just people aren't going to know enough about the system to be able to want to buy it or decide on if they're trading something in for it. But
Yeah.
looking forward 5 years, I think they're going to optimize a lot of this stuff, and that line is going to start leveling out again as they start getting all of these backwards compatibility games on there, and things are going to move forward again. That's what
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking.
Yes. And it's a solid point, but here's also my counterpoint.
Okay.
Sony has known that backwards compatibility was a thing since E3 2015 when Microsoft announced in that surprising move that they figured it out on the Xbox One. Because when both those consoles launched, they were not able to be backwards compatible. Their architectures were different from the ones built in the previous console, and they were very adamant about it. That
That is
yeah,
true.
backwards compatibility is not a thing here. And then Microsoft put in the effort to find a solution, which was through emulation, that was able to be compatible with consoles that were completely built different
Hmm.
from that one there. That was in 2015. So what you're telling me is that it's taken Sony 5 years to then launch the new console and saying that we're starting with 100 games.
I will
Can
give
you
you
see the
that. Yeah.
can
No,
you
I
see the
definitely see it.
can you see the optical nightmare this is?
Hmm.
Just thinking that with all that lead time and because a lot of people are like this should force Sony's move to add backwards compatibility to PS4 because it makes it look weaker in comparison, like with the flexibility that Microsoft is showing, having all these games open up to them. And then the excuse was that they're waiting. They currently at this point don't need it. They'll bake it in into the new console, and they're
Hmm.
just baking it with 100 games of their choosing, not all their library. So like the 300 something games that I have right now on my PS4, not all of them are gonna work. It's
Right.
just the 100 most popular ones. I'm like, that's completely unacceptable for me because every game that I have bought on the Xbox One, every
Hmm.
single one of them in that library, as soon as the Xbox Series X launches, that library pops up there immediately. All of it. No exceptions. They gotta get their shit together for this thing. Because the thing that keeps people in an ecosystem is being able to carry everything forward. Why a lot of people left 360 to PS4 because a lot of their purchases were not carrying forward and they switched over.
Yeah,
That's
that
what,
is definitely like. I know it's not like ideal. I'm just trying to think about it from like a long term standpoint.
Yeah.
On
Long term, I can see that, but you can't launch the console only with 100 games from the previous one that you
mhm,
just pick and choose. You can't. Like, right now, hopefully the reaction to those backwards compatibility right now, it's bewildering enough that they realize that they have to test as much as humanly possible
yeah,
to get most of those games available on PS5. Like, that's so blunderous.
not
Because
just that. Something that I'm just thinking about is all of the competitive multiplayer games that are trying to move forward. Like Rainbow Six Siege has already said they're working on a PlayStation 5 and Xbox One X.
it's it's
I mean,
it's
other
it's
one.
not gonna be an SKU. Like, is that gonna be its own thing? It's gonna be like and oh, listen to it. Like, Sony didn't even say anything about smart delivery system, like the one with Xbox. That
Yeah.
you buy that one Xbox One game and you get the Xbox Series X thing for free, and it's not an upgrade. It's the actual version of that game. Like, Sony didn't even do that.
Which means one of two things: either they're waiting to do something, or that means that it's completely blindsiding them. They have no response yet, and they're still working on something.
What
And
I feel that literally is what has been happening. for the last 4
7, 8
months.
months.
Since December, because
Okay, yeah,
the blindsiding happened with the reveal of the Xbox Series Xbox. That's when like they drove the garbage truck on fire and hit their limo.
yeah.
Like literally that's that's what happened there. And I'm just seeing that Sony really was not ready for all these aggressive moves from Microsoft, because I can't believe they're being so shy to the trigger with this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Because right now the narrative, they're like they're letting Xbox get away with the narrative. And here's the thing, they acted similarly back in PS3. PS3 was supposed to launch in 2005 and they delayed it a year because there was some components that they just didn't have to make the full console fully work for market, so they delayed it a full year. But they didn't care because they were like, we're PlayStation, people are still going to buy it.
Yeah.
In fact, we can sell 10 million of these units without a game. That's how powerful we are.
Hmm.
And why did Microsoft say that? Oh yeah, watch this. And they ate their lunch for an entire generation. Only the last year was when the PS3 finally caught up.
Hmm.
So and it caught up on the strength of its worldwide power, which you can't deny that. But Microsoft, being less powerful worldwide, was able to like really cut them off on the PS3. And it took Microsoft really stumbling because it took Microsoft again getting so big to the feeling they got too big for their bridges
Hmm.
for them to Sony finally be aggressive again. And they were able to undercut it in such a savage way back at E3 2013. I'm starting to see shades of that,
Yeah.
even though Sony's still doing really cool stuff. Like, I can't deny the SSD thing and their efficiency of their hardware. Like, because you don't know, maybe that the efficiency of their hardware is what helps them push maybe a cheaper price, even though I don't believe that will happen based on what we read from the Bloomberg report.
Yeah.
And so that's why all this the kind of tiny stuff like Microsoft is just making itself look better. And if not full backwards compatibility is happening on PS4, and people see that Microsoft is so incredibly open for that and respectful of the customers' purchases, people are gonna jump ship beyond just power. People will jump ship.
You know,
That's just how it is. And
unfortunately, you're very right.
it really is like that. Like many 360 people came to PS4. It happened.
Yep.
People
I
will
mean,
be
I was
willing to
one of
do
them
that.
actually.
Yeah. So that's why Sony needs to be better than this. They have to do better because Microsoft is just doing all things better, and it'll take just one massive dump from Microsoft to and a huge blunder from them to like cut their own momentum. But they're in the momentum, they're like getting everything right. And as cool, as great as the exclusives are, that can only take you so long. It's so much, Paul. Versus the consumer friendliness that Microsoft is still showing.
Very
Like,
true.
so yeah, this road to PS5 thing showcase, I think that was a big miss for what it was meant to be. I think this should have never been too hyped up by the social media channels, especially because there has been such starving for PlayStation content right now. With
Hmm.
because Sony hasn't been that this public since E3 2018, and their state of plays don't really count. So after almost 2 years of silence, for this to be kind of like their first kind of opening salvo, because I'm not gonna count that PS5 logo reveal. That was just garbage.
No, that
And
wasn't even a real thing.
exactly, that wasn't even a real thing for that. So yeah, and unfortunately, sometimes first impressions matter, and you needed to show that in a game how that SSD was gonna help, because those first impressions really stick with you. So
Hmm.
they better have something ready in a month. I'm not even kidding. Like the first few PS4 games showed how the SSD works, because that is what will help counteract the fact that they're the weaker console on paper now.
Hmm.
Because that's the thing. Like on paper, if you only look at numbers, the numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
I showed you I showed you the flow chart from both consoles. Numbers don't lie there.
Yeah.
Like they're still gonna be pretty powerful, but you don't need that much negativity heading into your console. That killed the Xbox One. Like the always online, even when they moved up from that, when it was revealed that the Xbox One was pretty weak compared to the PS4,
Hmm.
Xbox 720, people were calling it because a lot of games were running at 720p at launch compared to the PS4 at 1080p.
True.
So and it was more expensive. And in this case, and that was just a very particular way that how like all the chips fell on their on their lap there. But yeah, unless they nail the price, and unless they really show how the SSD, I think right now Microsoft is winning this thing. So and we'll see if the races tighten up. So anything else you want to say?
I
Because
think all that needs to be said has been said. I say, let's talk about something a little bit more exciting and something a bit more positive now.
hey, Paul. Yeah, speaking of positivity, we finally got a direct that wasn't just a game exclusive direct like Animal Crossing or Smash.
Yep, and
So-
I'd say we got a nice amount of new games, including one that came out the day of the direct. I think.
Exactly, yeah. And to just for people to know, that was the Nintendo Indie Showcase Direct.
Hmm.
So it's for like something that I have to give many props to Nintendo because Sony with the PS4 was the bastion for the indie when it launched.
Hmm.
They were the ones carrying like the PS4, PlayStation Labs indies,
Hmm.
and then most of them were released on the digital storefronts, and then the PS4 digital storefront has become a huge mess where it's very hard to find a specific game right now when you're like browsing that thing because so many games are there that the indie ecosystem kind of imploded on the PS4.
Yeah.
That they don't promote them as much when they were so big for them coming to PS4 that especially when they have the Vita, the PS Vita, which was a complete disaster for Sony, at the very
True.
least found its niche as a place for indie games, and people were really getting a lot of indie games on the PlayStation Vita because if you just felt those games felt at home there in more of a handheld. And the developer said, "We're making more money putting our games on Vita than on PS4, even though the PS4 has sold 40 times more than the Vita." It
Yeah.
just tells you more about like attach rates and all that. Once the Nintendo Switch came out, they kind of took the mantle for the indies, and seeing that kind of Nintendo Direct where they actually went to different developers from all over the world with very cute, very quirky, different looking games from the norm.
Hmm.
It was just a reminder of the things that Nintendo has been doing right, and especially as an appetizer for the other direct that's supposed to be next week, according to the rumor from last week.
Yes.
Um, Lots of games were announced, but we're not gonna read all of them. I told you to pick five of them
Yep.
that for the five that you felt were the most exciting. I'll start with mine.
Yeah. Go
Uh,
for it.
yeah, so I think the one that started the direct was called Blue Fire. That was kind of like a ninja game. That
Correct.
was like a platformer. That looked really cool. So I'm
I
like, I
really
like
enjoyed
platform.
that.
Yeah, the art style was very interesting in its design and kind of like the things that it was doing with platformers. I'm a sucker for platformers, so I was like all in on that. Then there was this one called Baldo,
Hmm.
which did you ever play Nino Kuni
I
or
did
heard of
not,
it?
but I know what you're talking about. It had a
Yeah,
very
so
similar style.
exactly. The art style is very like Studio Ghibli. So and it was like a top down. I don't know if it's like an RPG or something,
I think it is an
but
RPG, but
yeah,
it's mostly like old
top
school
down. Yeah,
Zelda
like
RPG,
top down. Yeah,
and
yeah.
that is
So
what got me.
yeah, Baldur looked interesting. Both Blue Fire and Baldur are coming out this summer. So that's cool. So at least we know some things that we'll be releasing in the summer, Paul. If this virus still keep wrecking things.
Really though.
Then there was the last campfire, which is from Hello Games, the the studio that made No Man's Sky. So
Oh shoot! I didn't realize that's who that was.
yeah, so Hello Games was like before they delve into the uncertainty of outer space with No Man's Sky, especially for a development team that's like 12 to 20 people, a very,
Hmm.
very tiny studio that made such a humongous game with very interesting technology with No Man's Sky. They were always doing small games. They did this motorcycle game called Joe Danger that was kind of
Okay.
like a motorcycle platformer from the PS3 360 era that was actually really good. And the No Man's Sky was like a huge left for them. It was like it was completely not what people were expecting from a studio that tiny, and probably they did more than they could chew because the launch of No Man's Sky is legendary,
Hmm.
and all the unfulfilled promises and all that, but also one of the greatest turnaround stories with how much they've added to that game for
Yes,
free
and
in
still
4
adding
years and
as of
still
like
adding
a month ago, I think.
and for free. The community
Yeah.
of No Man's Sky is so lovely now. What's happening there, and I'm glad that even in the midst of all doing all this stuff, because I'm trying to wonder how they're making money because they are not
That's
even
what I was thinking.
microtransactioning things. They're doing everything for free.
Hmm.
Obviously, they're doing that to like earn back goodwill, but also studios have to pay the bills. If they're just making money by people buying the game, that's quite impressive. But at the very least, now they're releasing a different game that looks very quirky and it also very emotional. It's called the last campfire.
Hmm.
Like seeing this like hooded guy that was like reviving some stuff and all that. I'm like, that gives me Journey vibes. Do
Oh
you ever
yeah,
play? Do you ever play Journey
I
from
did. It
that game
was
company? Yeah,
free on PS3
PS
one
Plus.
month.
Ah, yeah. So, and speaking of Journey, Sky
Hmm.
is from the developers of Journey.
And it looked just like it
Yeah,
immediately.
exactly. And what's interesting about Sky is that it has been iPhone exclusive for a while now. It
Really?
like yeah, so it launched on phones. I think it launched on Apple Arcade, if I'm not mistaken. But it was on phones, and that bummed me out so much because Journey is such a special game.
Hmm.
Like its art style, like its emotional resonance of partnership and all that happening in your journey to that mountain, all that was so good that it made me sad that their next game was stuck on a phone. So the fact that it's coming to consoles, I think it's first on Switch, but I don't know if it's coming to our consoles. But just the fact that it's going to be on a console makes me very excited because I've been wanting to play that kind of game again. Because I am always looking for that kind of emotional experience that's
Hmm.
artistic, and that's why both the Last Campfire and Sky reminded me of. And then to finish off, a game that actually released in the same day. I'm still just waiting for some money to kind of to give it a try because it looked quirky. Because and I also like the. Do you ever play Enter the Gungeon?
I never did, honestly, but
You
I
heard
like
about it, right?
the of it. Yeah.
Yes. There's Enter the Gungeon. Now there's Exit the Gungeon. So now it's gonna come in. Now you're coming out. So very fun, weird, messy game, and I'm glad that it was one of those. Hey, all of you that are in quarantine, here's a game. Here it is. So, Paul, what were your games?
Mine had a couple of similarities to you. Of course, my first couple, Blue Fire and Baldo. I love those. Blue Fire was really cool because I love the like the monochromatic look to it, but with like all the effects of the swords being all bright. And I really enjoyed that. It looks really fun to move around in like the 3D environments and use all your moves to the best of their abilities. But I was honestly more even impressed and excited for Baldo when that came out because that made me feel the same thing I felt when I played Wind Waker for the first time, which is
Mm-hmm.
for anybody listening my favorite Zelda game because it had
Great
such like a
choice.
sense of whimsical
Mm-hmm.
adventure to it. Like it just had this, yeah, we're gonna go in there, and it wasn't like a turn based because I was waiting for like the catch to this game because it looked like all right, we're moving around. I was waiting for like you to bump into a character and it goes into like a turn based little action movie. Like Nino Kuni even had its turn based. I believe it was like somewhat held back by that in my eyes.
The original game was a turn-based action, a turn-based RPG.
Okay, so I
Uh,
wasn't completely crazy. The second one moved away
the
from
second
that.
one wasn't. The second one was more active time active time battle,
Got
more
it.
mashy and all of that. People preferred the original over the
Right.
second one, but yeah. And what about your other games?
So the next one that I saw that looked cool, I don't really know too much about it outside of like the few seconds that I saw of it, but Summer and Mara, I believe the name of it was, looked really
Mhm.
fun. Just an adventure. You riding your boat, you're swimming, you're exploring this area. Seemed just really fun, and I've realized that I love like the low fidelity, almost low resolution, cartoony kind of look to it. At least all of these seem to have the same kind of feel. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Because, like, for one, the Switch can't really handle anything super crazy, but at the same time, these are indie games. They're made when they
And
don't have the ability for the high resolution, they go for a cartoony art style, which I
and
love.
you need that kind of art style for the Switch and its specs because uh, try to render something more realistic like Doom and Skyrim, you'll really see the
Yeah.
deficits. So, but do something more artistic, and it's why Breath of the Wild worked so well on the Switch because appealing, even though you can see some roughness around the edges sometimes, the art style and and the polish uh, works well with the technical limitations. Even Mario Odyssey,
Hmm.
uh, had that kind of whimsical art style just works well for Nintendo. They don't
Mm,
need to do realistic. We have so many realistic looking games already. Have a place for something, because the gaming industry needs variety. It
hmm.
always will, in its art styles and the kind of games that it has, and the variety is where is where we're finding that in the indie space. And I'm glad Nintendo is taking that, especially because they can't always be launching their exclusives.
Yeah, and so the next one that I had actually, which to right alongside it with yours, was the Last Campfire, because I just love that style. I love the sense of whimsical adventure that it's giving off, but it's also got like this darker, quieter look to it
Hmm.
that I feel
Melancholic.
is, yeah, melancholy is a good word for it because it just seems quiet. It seems like there's not too much going on, just you and you're trying to figure out whatever the heck is has killed or has turned to stone all of the other people that are of yours, and how to bring them back at least. So that was awesome. And before my last one, I wanted to add just a small honorable mention of Moving Out,
Oh
which that
yes.
game looked adorable and
Oh my god.
hilarious. Um,
It's like you know what it reminded me of? Overcooked in a way.
yes, that's
Yes.
exactly what I was thinking about.
It
And
was
that,
over. So it was overcooked by moving people by
mhm,
moving out like stuff, and like going through all these obstacles and all that. That would be
yeah,
like, if we were together, we were doing like let's plays and all that. I think that would
oh
be a fun
yes.
let's play.
That's exactly what I was thinking because like I didn't want to put it in my top five because I wouldn't probably get as much out of it as I would if I had a team of three other people with me.
Exactly. Yeah.
But at the same time, it just seemed like a lot of fun trying to like almost solve the puzzle of getting all of the items through this area in increasingly crazy areas and ways, crossing the street and all that to be able to make it. And I think that would be a lot of fun and very entertaining for a lot of people.
Yes.
And then my last suggestion was a game that I thought had already released on PC, but just seemed like a really fun one called Superliminal. And that was a game that like it's puzzles, but also it really messes with your head because you have to turn, like you're in a room and you have to get to a certain area, and the based on the way you're looking at something you can make it either larger, smaller. You can change the angle of it to the point where it's either like up against the wall like as a painting, but if you move a certain way it turns it into a real object that's in
Mm-hmm.
front of you. And just that idea of like needing to use your creativity to accomplish one thing to the next area just really resonated with me when I first saw the trailer forever ago. And now that I'm seeing that it's going to be on the Switch has me very curious and
Exactly.
definitely
Still
want
having to play it on Steam. So yeah.
to. Yeah,
Well,
looked
those
into it
were,
was on Steam.
yeah, yeah. So those were our five most exciting ones from a lot of games that were announced there. If you're interested, you can find a list on the internet. We're not gonna say all of
Yeah,
them. So yeah,
just go have fun.
yeah. And now just some quick news here, just for
Yes.
general PSA. So apparently, you'll notice that Doom Eternal is on sale on all consoles for $49.94 on Amazon, which is interesting
Yes.
because the game's still not doesn't come
Released
out
yet.
until tomorrow, basically, when we're recording at midnight,
Right.
which I'm very
True.
excited right now. I wasn't expecting to get it because I remember we had that conversation, but with all
Hmm.
this quarantine garbage happening, I need something new to play. So, what else? What better to play than Hell on Earth and fighting demons? I
Yeah.
mean,
Real.
basically Hell on Earth right now. So, yeah, if you're interested in saving some stuff, at least at the very least, until further notice, Amazon is still delivering stuff. So, if you're still an old schooler that wants to buy a disc, you can get it there. And speaking of, and then other things that you could be playing for this week, if you don't want to at least spend some money but want to give it a try, uh, Assassin's Creed Odyssey is free to play right now on from March 19th to March 22nd. How that works is that you can download the game, play as much as you want, and if you still want to keep playing the game after you finish that trial period, you just have to buy it and just keep playing.
Hmm.
So yeah, AC Odyssey. I tell you, I'll just say it. It's not a game that you're gonna beat in 3 days.
Nope.
It is an odyssey of an adventure.
At least 50 hours.
Oh no, more. Mine was
I said
84
yeah.
hours. Yeah, 84 hours
Jeez.
was my account, and I still haven't platinumed it yet. Still have lots in the. It's like it is an incredibly meaty game, almost to a fault. That's probably ground zero for me of like the of games getting too big for their own good. But it was still a game that I really enjoyed at the time. So Maybe I will still give the warning that for some reason it's a game that takes up to 15 hours to really click. And I think why you're having trouble going back to it, Paul, is that it really
Mhm.
takes that long to get back into the swing of things of that
It
thing.
does.
Because
It
I've tried
just
going back for the DLC and it just
Mhm.
I don't feel it. I'm like, yeah, I'm not feeling this right now. So, but yeah, it's something to keep an eye on. I mean, free games is free games.
True that.
Take everything
And if
free
you
for
don't have it, I say take advantage of it for sure.
exactly. And finally, if you like more the multiplayer stuff, last week Call of Duty Modern Warfare Warzone Battle Royale launched, and a week after launch, not only has it already reached 15 million players in 3 days, they also already launched the solo mode,
Mhm.
which it's like something very important in many battle royales. PUBG had it, Fortnite had it, Apex Legends had it a little for last a
For
limited
an event
time.
and then took it away.
Yeah, so it's like, and I tell you, I feel that's why I don't play Apex as much because I always like going in the solo playlist.
Yeah.
Just because. So that's cool that they already added it.
Mhm.
Modern Warfare battle royale has been actually pretty popular. Actually, pretty popular. And who would have thought Call of Duty again once popular? It tells you that series
Really.
still popular.
It's
So
gonna be very strange whenever Activision reveals like the next Call of Duty this year, and everybody's
mhm.
like, "But Modern Warfare was so fun. Can we keep playing it?"
Exactly. I feel them releasing this as free to play means that they're willing to like keep supporting it.
Oh
They're
yeah.
gonna have their cake and eat it too, because the Blackout Battle Royale from Black Ops 4,
Hmm.
them leaving it stranded on Black Ops was a huge mistake, because the Battle Royale, the market is on the free to play. It
Yeah.
really is there. Like, so I think they learned their lesson, and
Well, they
maybe what
did
they're
end up making Blackout free to play for
no,
everyone.
they
What?
didn't.
Yeah,
No,
I thought
no,
they
it's
for
not.
sure they did.
No, they never did. That's why this one was such a big deal.
Huh.
Yeah,
Well, all right. Well, yeah, Call of Duty Modern Warfare definitely doing that is going to be very fun.
exactly. So yeah, those that was all the news for when it comes to gaming. Quite meaty, but we haven't done this section for a while, and I think it's pertinent to do it this week. So Paul, press
For
X for.
some movies. And all the things related. Ba, 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 ba.
Right,
So,
Paul. So COVID
uh,
19, Paul. So what's been the thing that COVID-19 has been doing to all our lives?
it has ruined everything,
Yeah,
Alejandro. It has
and
delayed and shut down just about every project that we were excited about coming up in the next year. As far as delays, is all the things that are recently coming out in like the next like month or two. So like Black Widow has been delayed. Fast and Furious 9 is I think next year now.
they delayed it a full year. Mulan indefinitely.
Yes,
Quiet
Mulan.
Place 2, I think also indefinitely, if I'm not
Um,
mistaken.
I'm not sure. I think they just said that was delayed, and then of course the new James Bond movie was supposed to come out. I think early this summer or
No,
in
it was next
May.
month. It was
Oh,
like next
really?
month.
April?
Yeah. Yeah, it was
Shoot,
April,
yeah.
May, and then they pushed it back to November, which the
Hmm.
irony is that James Bond movies always come out in November. This would have been the first one to be released as a summer blockbuster.
Huh.
So they just put it back in the usual release dates for Bond movies. So
And to add some more interesting knowledge that I've recently found out about this movie is that, for one, of course, it's Daniel Craig's last movie as James Bond.
mhm,
He went through the trouble of being on Saturday Night Live, I think, as the host, to have an entire conversation about that. They showed like a spoof scene from it.
mhm,
They've spent a ton of money marketing this movie, and they said they are going to have to spend another 30 million to remarket it for its November release now.
yeah,
Um, and they just nothing to do about it. They have to completely shut the whole thing down, and then or at least push that back. But as far as shutting down completely indefinitely, as far as right now, is the new Marvel Shang-Chi
yeah. The
movie that was going to be coming out, the Lord of the Rings Amazon show of all things, unfortunately, the live action Little Mermaid, the new Batman movie that we've been talking about, Stranger Things season 4, The Witcher, James Cameron's Avatar movies, which we already know don't actually exist and he's making this up, Flash season 6, The
yeah.
100.
Yeah,
fall season of
yeah.
movies.
So Flash season 6 bums me out because they're having such a good season right now, and they were missing the last two episodes, and they shut down indefinitely
Hmm.
until this virus is sorted out. And seasons usually end in May, and they were still filming right now, and they're still not gonna film. So it makes me worried that that season is gonna get cut short, which is sad. And the 100 has their final season, and they still haven't
Oh,
finished filming. That kind of bums me out, also. So yeah, it's coronavirus killing everything.
yeah, really. Yep. So that's all the stuff that. Well, there's one more thing, but we can push that back for a second. But the next thing that I wanted to mention, as far as our X reel, is the new Star Wars Clone Wars show has been moving along. It is up to I think 4 episodes now out
Yeah,
of the 12
the
they
first
have set.
arc, the first arc completed out of three arcs
Yes,
that they're gonna do for this final season.
correct.
Real quick, what do you think of that first arc?
I was not a huge fan of it at first. I mean, I love the Bad Batch, but it
Hmm.
felt too much like a completely disconnected storyline for my liking. And I felt like there was nothing that I was gaining from this. Like usually in the middle of the season, of course, they have that one arc that really doesn't have anything to do with the rest of it. You got like the
Hmm.
R2D2 4 episode arc where
Oh,
he's with
that
Leia.
wasn't the beginning of that arc. That was halfway through season 5.
Oh, jeez.
I remember that really well because it was torture.
It was
Those whole
horrible.
episodes were
um,
torture.
they've had several journeys out into like that experimental ground where like they'll just kind of have this weird side story that just doesn't seem to have anything to do with it. Maybe it'll play back into something where like I mean we did have the moment not necessarily to spoil anything, but we have a bit of a moment where Anakin shows some of the darker side of him, where like you threaten somebody that's close to him and he does not respond very well to it to show that he's just not adjusted in the slightest. And then his cavalier attitude to the horrible things he kind of does kind of shows the truth of like who he really is still, that he's not growing as a person. He's going to fall at the end of all of this, of course. Um, but I did like that idea. I did like that they were kind of delving into this idea of what's the word, like the strategy that they're trying to come up with, like what actually comes up with these strategies as they're fighting. But I still was not a huge fan of. I just wasn't a huge fan of it. However, there is a a silver lining, of course, that the next episode is going to mark the return of Ahsoka Tano, the most beloved Star Wars character, I think, that has had one of the greatest redemptions as far as the fandom goes in
Going from
all the
so
Star
hated
Wars
in that
series.
original movie to to the
Yes,
heart of that show.
and
So yeah,
the heart of the whole series, honestly.
exactly. Yeah. So I've always been adamant that Clone Wars has always been a great show, but they always have had those arcs that kind of like they're the filler arcs in a way, but they always have their moments. I think what made that Bad Batch arc stick out a little bit more is the fact that this is a final season that's only 12 episodes, and the
Hmm.
first four were the only thing that to me was meaningful was knowing that Obi-Wan actually knew about Anakin and Padme for a long time.
Right. Yeah, that
And
was actually kind of cool.
and
Um,
then seeing and then seeing Anakin kind of like show more of his darkness, but with like the execution of those generals, if I remember
yeah,
correctly, that looked a lot like his Episode 3 Separatist attack at Mustafar. So
similar.
they're like drawing more closely to that. So, but yeah, other than that, it was okay. But let's see how this Ahsoka arc
That's what
goes
I'm interested in because
because.
she's now following something similar to that loved and sadly canceled game that we were going to get, Star Wars 1313,
Mhm.
where she is traveling through the underbelly of Coruscant, getting
Season
mixed
5.
up into some things, and I am all for it.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, that's Clone Wars. So let's see how this goes. So Paul, I think that's pretty much it for both our movies and game news, which was quite a meaty week considering we're all in self isolation. So
That it
Paul, it was.
was.
I hope that you stay healthy. Everyone that's listening to us, thank you for listening to us.
Hmm.
Um, hopefully, this is some fun stuff that you can listen while you're also practicing social distancing. So
True that.
Paul, until next time. Um,
I'd say press X to
to
play.
play. Hasta la vista, baby.
Have a good night, everybody. Remember to cough into your elbows
or day whenever you're listening to this.
or day.